Greetings, Starfighter. You've been chosen by the Star League to defend the frontier against Zur and the Kodan Armada. Hello, everyone. It's another spoiler room. Mark the Movie Man here, and man, do we've got another great room here tonight. Just to let you know, to go along with this episode, we have a special interview with Maggie. Yes, Catherine Mary Stewart actually sat down and got a chance to talk to her about The Last Starfighter, as well as a few other things. Make sure you check out that episode. It was a great interview, and it was a lot of fun, learned a lot, and so make sure you check that out. But tonight on this episode, we're going to be talking about Flight of the Navigator, Explorers, and The Last Starfighter, and to help me discuss about these three influential 80s sci-fi films, we have, first off, Mr. Bradley. How are you today, sir?
I am doing very well, coming to you live and direct from my son's bedroom.
Kind of appropriate considering the films we're talking about tonight, so sort of. And Dawn is in the room with us. Hello, the diva of the spoiler room. How are you?
I am just fine, thank you. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hello. Woohoo! And of course, we have the BFD himself, Mr. Glenn Bittner's back. Howdy, Glenn. How are you?
Hi.
How have sales in Settler of Catan going?
Oh, they're just fine.
Do you need a hug, Glenn? Because does all that selling of Settlers just drain your soul? I want to reach through here and like give you a big old hug. Maybe a little bit of tongue, but whatever.
We'll save that video for later.
No, just
$2.99.
Just a food coma.
And we have in here as well Mr. Paul Salzer. Paul, how are you tonight, sir?
I'm doing fantastically, thank you.
Fantastic. And finally, last but definitely not least, Mr. Scott Davis is in his house. Hello, Scott. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Word up. And tonight we are talking about, I've been trying to do this episode for a while. It's near and dear to my heart. I don't know if it is for anyone else, but I decided I wanted to talk about these three, for me, influential young family, however you want to put it, sci-fi films. And we're going to start off right tonight with the one from 1984, the oldest one first, which is The Last Starfighter. Now, for those of you out there who may have been born after 1980, The Last Starfighter is about a video gaming boy seemingly doomed to stay in the trailer park for where he's grown up in, and then he finds himself hired to be a gunner for an alien defense force, hence defending the frontier against Zur and the Kodan Armada. Let's start right off with Brad. Brad, Last Starfighter, what are your early memories of this movie?
I think that the first time I didn't get to see it in the theater. I didn't didn't get to see a whole lot of movies in the theater at that time. Unfortunately, I lived out in the boondocks, and getting a ride to the movie theater was a little rough. But when I did finally see it, God, yeah, 3D graphics. Okay, and looking at the time frame on this is 1984. The amount of 3D graphics that were in this film were staggering, and I remember doing a lot of, because I was a computer nerd, well, still am, but reading that they had put together like a Cray computer to process all of this imagery to put 3D into the film. Sadly, the 3D doesn't hold up at this day and age, but it's sort of a part of the charm of the film,
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things that I've always appreciated. That, I mean, for the love of God, this has more processing power than Cray does.
At the time.
It could run circles around it, but you need to appreciate the fact that the amount of time and energy that went in to do what they did was staggering, and that that they took a chance on doing something like that is pretty amazing. Gosh, I think I probably have seen it. I think when I finally did see it, it was on TV, and then over time I've seen it on you know, VCR, and I've seen it on DVD a number of times, and I actually rented it on Google Play because I couldn't find my copy, just so I could, freshen up my memory of it. And God, I still love it to this day. The story still holds up. The effects, the I guess I want to say the practical effects hold up to this day.
Right.
But like I said, the 3D, not so much.
But you appreciate it, though, for the time period that they made this, and no one really had done to this extent. I mean, ILM was using models yet at that time. They were using practical models, and in fact, I remember, 77 when Star Wars came out, just to render the diagram of the Death Star took hours upon hours to render that one thing where they showed the little map of how they were supposed to torpedo the Death Star. So the fact that you've got it, 7 years later, they're trying to do a full movie with textured graphics and that. You really got to appreciate what they did. Dawn, what about you for Last Starfighter? Your early memories, if you have any.
I also did not see it in the theater. My first time seeing it was on VHS. I found it very memorable. I had seen Night of the Comet right around the same time, and thought that Catherine Mary Stewart was such a badass. I was hoping for a strong female character in this one, and got something quite a bit softer, which was not a bad thing. But I still really, really liked the movie. Although, and I think it holds up well, but it is very much, along with the other two movies that we're going to discuss, it is very much a teenage boy wish fulfillment fantasy film.
Yeah.
And that is why I think it holds up so much and so well still.
Sure.
Because people can still connect with that wish of wanting to be picked for something so huge.
Sure. Well, especially in it involved video games. So, which again back then, unfortunately, was still associated, like you mentioned, that boy fulfillment thing of playing a video game and finding out it's real. Now we all know females as well play video games quite extensively, but back then, still in the culture, it was usually boys you saw play video games. So. Yeah, you're right on that, but it still can connect because gaming is so huge nowadays. I think that's another connection that people can still make with this movie, even if the special effects aren't really the greatest. So, Glenn, what about you, sir? Early memories for Starfighter?
Yeah, I wanted to live in a trailer park. I thought that would be awesome.
Did you want that video game though?
Oh, hell yeah.
Everybody wanted that game.
I wanted that video game, absolutely. The closest I could get was playing Gyrus, probably.
I still want that game.
But did you get a chance to see it in the theater at all, Glenn? Or?
I saw it twice in the theater, and then I had it on VHS as well, taped off of, I think, HBO.
Sure.
And I probably wore that tape out.
And Paul, what about you, sir? Early thoughts on your early memories with Last Starfighter?
I loved the characters, and everyone talks about the graphics, but do you remember the sound of the movie? The sounds in those movies, it was just phenomenal. I did not see it at the theater as well. I saw it in VHS, and it just kind of reminds me of the old video exchange. I used to live in a smaller town, and of course this movie made you think that you could get out of that small town and you could become someone. And so this movie did have a lot of an appeal to me because of that.
And my compliments on the bow tie, by the way.
Thank you very much.
I-
Absolutely.
yeah, not many people can sport that. Uh, and Scott, what about you, sir?
I saw. Well, you couldn't. It was hard to get me to not see something in a theater if it had a spaceship in it. Basically, anything. If it was science fiction, that's one thing. And there's one movie that we're going to cover that I didn't see in the theater on this episode. But if it had like anything to do with space or science fiction, I was just there. You had to take me. My brother took me to see this. I remember and like every other movie I dragged him to, he's like, "This is stupid. Or that wouldn't happen in real life." And you know what? Yeah, screw him because this is just a great movie. I watched it in the theater. I mean, of course, like every other science fiction film, it immediately became my favorite movie for the moment. When it premiered on cable, I also taped it. I remember I taped it off Showtime, so there's a difference. Um, and I wore that tape out. Came out on DVD. I got that. I got the DVD. Came out on Blu-ray. I got the Blu-ray. It still holds up, and I actually could tell now. I don't know if this is just because I was following stuff like this, and I remembered like Tron was another one of my favorite films. I got right away like, oh, the ships are computer animated. I got that right away. I said, yes, it looks like computer animation. I don't care. It looks awesome to me. And as Paul pointed out, it sounds awesome too. And they all just kind of had this feeling, of like people who were just anonymous and they felt like they couldn't do anything in life. There are so many of these little nobodies, and especially really playing into the ideas of a family that's struggling with financial problems, with student loans, the rising cost of higher education. He was never going to get out of that damn trailer park. And to actually have it say, like, not only are you going to get out of the trailer park, you're going to go to worlds that no human being has ever seen. And not only that, you are going to be singularly responsible for saving those worlds. Whoa! I mean, that was a kind of like archetype that they really played with, that great pulp archetype, and it completely worked here. You had Nick Castle directing, a former associate of John Carpenter, and he just did a fantastic job with this movie. I mean, you look at this, yeah, a lot of this movie is pure 80s. And Dawn is absolutely right. This was right out of the handbook of adolescent fantasy, as much, or at least as much as they could do in a PG-rated movie. And but well, I mean, seriously, because when you get down to it, like True Romance, that's also an adolescent fantasy. Mm-hmm. This was right out of that as well, and man, it just worked. It worked so well. I don't care how much it's dated. I don't care how much this film holds up. I love Last Starfighter. I loved it when I was 8 years old, 9 years old, and I still love it today.
And I think we can all agree, actually, the 80s in general was kind of a golden age for genre films. I mean, horror and sci-fi especially. I mean, sci-fi was extensive. And this was stuff that, I mean, I think now people take for granted. I know for me, when I got to first see it in the theater, I thought it was amazing. I knew it was computer-generated graphics, too. And the Blu-ray looks fantastic if anyone hasn't seen the Blu-ray yet.
Mm-hmm.
The Blu-ray, those colors for those animations are just phenomenal. But I learned some stuff, not only from behind the scenes, but talking... Catherine Mary Stewart had mentioned it too, that they were developing programs while they were shooting this film. I mean, this isn't something where they went to ILM and, hey, can I borrow your Cray computer or whatever. They actually had programmers having to write stuff so they could finish a scene. And they couldn't finish a scene till these guys worked on this particular programming code, and when they had it done, they went back through the film and put that code in so they could finish the scene. I mean,
wow.
So for a little film, which you could kind of consider this a little film, I believe it's made a comment, I think it was Siskel or Ebert, one of the two mentioned it, one of the best B movies to be out there, because if you look at it, I mean, from a certain standpoint, you had some big names in there, but really, this is at its core a B sci-fi film. If you look at, the way it's handled and the approach and everything, but they do some phenomenal stuff in here, and I think it really, I mean, am I off by thinking that maybe this really set the precedent for what they did in future sci-fi films? Glenn, would you say that they kind of set a bar for what you could possibly do in a sci-fi film, even if the animation wasn't finished?
Oh, absolutely. Well, I mean, they set a different bar because I mean, as cool as everything looked, I mean, I personally would still take the look of Star Wars from 8 years earlier
Sure.
with model effects. But I still liked it, and I still think that they definitely showed that they opened the door for the fact of that. Oh, these little gizmo computer thingies might be useful for something someday.
Yeah, it definitely at least showed potential. What about you,
Well,
Brad? You think it
Sorry.
kind of set the idea of what they could do with it?
you know, in looking at it, to me, it actually made it. There's a strong plot thread through here. There are
Mhm.
characters that are well developed. There are characters that you care about. There's Robert Preston. I mean, my God, you know,
Yeah, absolutely.
his presence, and he's not in the film very long, but when he's there, God, you just love the hell out of that guy. So it wasn't just. I think there was a thought that you needed to do space opera, maybe.
Mhm.
Maybe. Because I don't think Star Wars had quite. I mean, it was big, but it's gotten bigger over time. But that need to have plot and not just, oh, here's some spaceships and here's some stuff and here's some guns shooting and here's some laser beams. No, it had to actually have a story. It needed to be cohesive. It needed to have a point. There needed to be, I mean, there was an underlying theme to the film that just resonated, and it just raised a bar, I guess, is the best way to say it. And you couldn't really have a decent sci-fi movie without that. Anything less than that was just B-movie crap. And I enjoy some B-movie crap, but I enjoy something that has an actual plot that's cohesive
Sure.
and is followable, and that's what this had in spades.
Well, it is. It's really a character-driven piece, and this is yet again another example of why people think, oh, why do you like these older movies? Because they wrote a story first, and then they did the special effects to help tell it, rather than come
Yes.
up with the special effects first. It's not like they came up with, oh, I'm going to do a gun star, and we need to work this into a movie somehow. No, they came up with the story first, and then it was like, well, how are we going to do this now to tell our story? And I think at its core, it is just a nice character-driven piece. What would you think, Donna? Would you say that the special effects are here to serve, to tell the story rather than be the story?
Absolutely, absolutely. It is all about the story, um and the special effects are just supportive
Hmm.
and to set the scene.
Yes, definitely set the scene, and I loved all the characters, but even the minor characters in here were kind of memorable. Scott, what one of the minor characters, not just we had Maggie and Alex and Krieg, but what are some of the minor characters you might have remembered that you enjoyed? Were there any that stood out for you?
Well, gosh, I mean, you named some of my favorites. I loved Grig, of course. Dan O'Hurley, he is, first of all, anyway. Anything he's in, he's been in good movies and bad movies, and I've always loved seeing him. He's just fantastic, and to see him as a lizard person, I still hear people that are surprised. They said, "Wait, that was the same guy who was in Halloween 3. That was the same guy. That was the same guy who played the boss in RoboCop. That was the same guy who was in the remake to Caligari and all these other films." Like, yeah, same dude. Great guy. I love him. Even though it's technically the same character,
Right.
I liked the Beta Unit a lot. I always felt the Beta Unit got a raw deal. I did, because here's the thing: is that he gets the raw deal. Not only does he get put there, he has this great spoiler alert, guys. If you haven't figured out the name of the show, It's he has this great noble sacrifice and everything, and I was like, people are gonna respect him now. And remember when they're explaining who he is at the end. Oh, that was Beta Unit. That was a robot. Like he just got told you when you first met that was really offensive. That's like calling him like a racial slur. It is first. I always thought he got a real raw deal. I like the robot. Every one of these movies, if they didn't focus on a kid, if they were inspired by Spielberg or Lucas or anything like these films were they were coming out with, even if they didn't focus on a kid, they always had to have the little kid in there. And
Right.
Lewis is not nearly as annoying as most of these kids. Lewis, I could actually see saying like, there was a little bit of Lewis in me as a kid. I could see that, you know.
Were you hiding Playboys? Were you hiding
I
Playboys under
wanted
your
that
bed?
Playboy collection. It was so hard. I didn't start my collection until much later, but I was, but I was like, yeah, okay, Lewis is all right, I guess. He's better. He's better than the kid from Flight of the Navigator's little brother. Let's just say that.
And you do. I guess he was cut out, but Will Wheaton is in there as a kid, as Lewis's buddy. Apparently he cut the cutting room floor, but there were some lines. But you can see him, I guess, in the background or occasionally. So there's a little bit linked to Next Generation in there with a very young Will Wheaton.
Yeah, he's one of the kids in the very beginning running around
Mm-hmm.
the trailer park that you see a group of like 4 kids running around the trailer park.
And you know, there's also a thing about the special effects that, just to go back real quick, is that guys were talking about the special effects. There was, you know, I mentioned Tron before. I remember that because Tron was such a big deal because of what it did with computer effects and stuff. And honestly, it didn't do as much as everybody thinks it did because a lot of that stuff was weirdly practical.
No.
But they did a documentary for Disney Channel around the time as a tie-in called Beyond Tron, where they talked about all these films and everything that they were going to do with computer animation and how this was the wave of the future and everything. The only film, in my opinion, to really accomplish that within, say, like that decade, and actually have it resonate with the story, as you guys mentioned, and not be just a gimmick. Actually have it serve the story and be organically integrated. It's such a great deal. The only film to really do that justice was The Last Starfighter, I thought.
Right. I definitely agree with that, definitely. And Paul, what about you? Minor characters outside of our main leads that kind of stood out for you? Oh, we can't hear you, buddy.
Unmute.
Yes, I did. I did mute myself because I didn't want to interrupt all this great knowledge that you guys are putting up. So
Usually it's just because I nudge the button. So, that's what happens.
I wanted to
Usually because I have to fart.
Granny. The Granny is an awesome character, a minor
Granny.
character, but Granny. And you were talking about the connection to Star Trek. She was in the original one. She was one of the aliens.
Yeah.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the tie-ins to Star Trek are just amazing in this film. And
Yeah,
Halloween.
she was one of the Telosians, wasn't
Yeah,
she?
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, I was going to ask if she was the Gorn.
No. I don't think Meg Wiley was the Gorn, but yeah, she was in one of the.
No, you can tell by the arm definition. She was
Yeah,
she's pretty badass.
She was a fun character, though. But you got a whole bunch of these older character actors in this film in that trailer park. Even just 1 or 2 lines. But yeah, Granny's a great character, especially when she's bopping on those original orange headphones on the Walkman.
Just like her with the big shotgun. I'm like, you're gonna like fly backwards if you pull the trigger on that thing.
But if she wouldn't have let Maggie go at the end, I would have hated her for my whole life. I would have hated her.
I think everybody would have. Glenn, what about you? Any minor characters that you enjoyed?
Well, there is Tentacle Alien,
Yes.
who actually wasn't really much of an actor,
No.
but he actually went on to be executive producer of all the Real Housewives stuff.
Oh, did he really?
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So that was probably him in his natural form then.
Pretty close, yeah. Yeah, I think aside from this, he was like in Tag the Assassination Game, and maybe
Another
one other
Nick-
thing.
Oh, I
Another
remember
Nick, which was Nick Castle's first film, tagged the assassination game.
Well, Nick Castle had a number of people that he worked with regularly in this film. So I mean, we're going back again to the days of kind of indie type approach of you had this crew of people you worked with, and they got recommended. I mean, for me, the ties to John Carpenter to this film are insane, with how many people were chosen either behind or in front of the camera because of work with Halloween 2 and.
Is it true that Nick Castle was the Shape?
Yes.
Yes,
It
he
is
was.
true.
Yes,
Okay.
Nick Castle
Yes,
was
the guy
originally.
the guy who directed Last Starfighter was the same guy who carved up PJ Souls. And that is, I almost forgot about that. That is an awesome thing to bring up.
Yes, it is.
I love this movie even more.
Isn't that freaking great?
Directed by Mike Myers.
Yes.
Don, what about you?
Random character of note. Bruce Abbott was one of the Rylans that got blown up. Bruce Abbott I'm sure he did other things, but my personal favorite always is the Reanimator movies.
Yes. Yeah, and I love the makeup for those Rylans. Actually, all the makeup in here was pretty good.
It really was.
The practical makeup in there. Brad, what about you? Minor character?
Otis.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's what I was
Vernon
trying-
Washington.
I'm trying to remember his name.
Yeah.
He was good. That's a good one.
His importance in that film is, I mean, to Lance Guest's character, to Alex. Sorry, I had a brain fart. Of course, it's the same name as my son, which is even more shameful. I need to be beaten. No,
like if you're
you
anything
know.
like my folks, they can't remember the names of their kids when they're upset either. So.
Oh no, I remember it's like when he's not in the house. It's like, who's that kid that stops by occasionally? No, Otis is, to me, he's like a father figure to Alex. And granted, I'm pretty certain that I don't think it's firmly established, but he seems to be the manager of the entire trailer court.
He's at least
And
the
Alex
manager.
helps.
I think
Yeah.
so. Yeah.
Yeah, he's like the manager or the supervisor or whatever.
But
Landlord.
watching him in a couple of scenes, the one where he tells Alex, when that chance comes, you got to grab on with both hands and hold tight. I mean, that's something that resonated with him, resonates with us. It's the purpose of the film. But the other thing too is when the fight when Maggie comes back from Silver Lake because Jack has brought her and it's late and he's playing the game, and watching Otis just kind of kick back and like have his metaphorical popcorn and go, okay, well, shit's about to get real here. I'm just watching him, and that the way you can read it in his face and his body language that he's like, young love, and boy, this is going to get funny really fast. I just want to see what happens, and just watching it go. No, I really enjoyed that, and how excited he was for Alex to be about to break the record and getting like the entire trailer court to come up and witness this thing that he knows that Alex is really, he wants something more, and to have him try to help celebrate something that makes him exceptional just really endeared him more to me as a character.
Otis almost served like Alex's subconscious of hope, like getting over that cynicism and being that voice of, why don't you just go and do this?
And the one thing that I noticed too, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No,
is
go ahead.
I noticed that in the house, in Alex's house, there was a picture of him, Lewis, his mother, and some dude, and it's never really established if the father is still in the picture or what's going on, but you don't really see him, so Otis is sort of like the surrogate father figure for Alex, so it was nice to see representation there.
Yeah, well, we are talking about mid '80s where divorce was on the rise, and that was like of a big thing for families and the single mom raising the two kids. And it isn't never addressed because that probably would get a little bit too heavy. But you just
Yeah.
it's another one of those things where I love, get off my lawn moment. These classical movies in that they don't spell everything out to you, but you can tell by the situation they're in pretty much how things are. Dad's at least out of the picture. The mom's struggling to take care of the two boys, and you kind of put together that okay, she's a single mom, or at least separated. There is no dad, like you said, and so you have Otis in there, as well as the rest of the trailer park kind of being their surrogate family, and
Yeah.
everybody kind of taking care of each other too. It's like Alex is the guy who fixes things. Even though you have Otis, everybody it's like someone's electrical goes out, they don't call Otis, they call Alex. So Alex is known, in there as the guy, and but yet everybody treats him almost like their kid, especially when he's winning the video game, and half the people don't even know what, you know,
Well,
what's going on.
Also, and God, Otis, what a great choice, because Centauri's the guy. Of course, we love Centauri. I had just seen The Music Man around the same time,
Sure.
so when I say "Welcome to Rylos, my boy," I'm like, "Ooh, he's great," But he's fantastic, and he's the one who gives the kid a chance.
Right.
Okay, he's the one, but he's not really there to instruct him.
Mm-mm.
Alex gets a lot of his life lessons not from anybody in space. He gets them from Otis, which kind of makes, if this is following the space opera approach where everybody wanted the next Star Wars, he would be kind of the de facto Obi-Wan type character of the film, because he's the one. I mean, when they're in the ship and everything, it's Alex isn't talking about something Centauri once told him, even though Centauri told him some wonderful things. He's talking about the things that Otis taught him.
Right.
Otis was the one who you get the feeling raised him, especially when his dad either passed away or divorced his mom or whatever happened. So I mean, he really is a good character.
Yeah, he is a standout character, especially watching it for the umpteenth time and watching it a little more closely for the show, rather than just casually watching it. I'm like trying to pick out things. Yeah, Otis is he was on my list of favorite. And I'm going to toss out another one. It's the bad guy, but Norman Snow's Zur. I love Zur in this. I'm sorry, I know he's the bad guy.
He's got the flared nostrils and everything. He's great.
I just love how over the top. And Norman Snow really didn't do many features. He had been mostly, I think, soap opera and TV actor. But he played this. But I think it fit for the movie. Because you're doing kind of these really over the top things with the CG effects and the alien practical effects. So you kind of need an over the top villain, and I personally enjoyed Zur quite a bit. And this was PG, yet they did show a torture scene where a guy's head pretty much melts.
Yeah, that was brutal.
That was pretty brutal. But for me,
Just
outside
that
of Otis,
scream.
yeah.
When he started crying, I'm like, oh my god!
I know, right? Great, they're sucking his essences. But for me, I get a kick out of his villain because he's even over the top for his allies. I mean, he's a guy that nobody really wants there, and he's trying to act all badass. And the Codads don't want him there. They're like, what the heck is this guy doing here if he didn't have the codes,
He reminded me of the guy in college that everybody fucking hated, but he had the car, and he could take you to the concert or whatever, but it's like, oh god, yeah, we gotta have this guy along. Jeez, what an ass. I really wanted the Kodans to just like turn around and just either bitch slap him or punch him in the face.
Yeah, right.
Really, just so unlikable.
Yeah, he was unlikable, but I guess that's why I like him, just because he was over the top, but with the way they established everything else in the film, you bought into his character. You accepted, I think anyway, that you kind of accepted the Zur character. Okay, this is just some crazy guy. And that effect that they do with his head scattering, they actually went to some special place specifically for that effect because they had just successfully tested it, I guess, while they were filming it. It was completely separate from the movie. And they later they learned about it and wanted to use that effect, so they actually shot it with that overlay with the video and breaking it into 1,000 million, little sparkles. And apparently that wasn't originally planned, but they heard about that and wanted to use it in the film. So, just another thing with the special effects that shows you how kind of special this film was. But with the Kodans, as well as, and Glenn mentioned the tentacle folks, Don, what'd you think of the alien designs that we had in here? I mean, for a film where you usually get sci-fi of some kind of human form, I thought it was pretty cool. You had some real aliens.
I really liked that. I really did. The costumes design was really well done. And some of the details they used, like the, gosh, I forget what they were called. The bounty hunter.
Oh, yeah, the Zandozans.
The little details with them being able to shape-shift and hide, and the stinky drool.
And the specially designed binoculars just for their
yes,
wide eyes.
Exactly.
That was awesome.
Exactly. The costuming was it was really well planned and executed.
Of course, they did use the universal sci-fi prop that had been used since the 1960s. In that Krieg was messing with the two tubes with the red lights that alternate. you know which one I'm talking about.
Blinking and blinking.
Yet another Star Trek connection.
Yes, another Star Trek connection. Paul, what'd you think about the alien designs?
I did like them. I liked the Kodan. I love that little eyepiece that Lord had. Lord Trill. It was my favorite thing, especially when he delivers that line that "we die." That was just so neat. And then, of course, Grig.
Yeah.
His character just looked like a believable alien to me. I mean, it didn't look like a puppet. It didn't look like anything that looked unreal to me. It looked real.
The only thing that I wish that they would have had at that point in time was better rubber prosthetics, because his mouth.
Yeah.
And granted, we're talking the early '80s here. It's not a deal breaker by any means, but in looking at his body of work, I think he would have been, if he could have gotten his face to move just a little bit more, he did very well. I mean, he compensated by his joviality, his laugh. He worked a lot with his body. Yeah, and he did a lot of work with his body
acting with his body.
Animated from the neck down because he had a limited scope. The work that they did with his eyes, though, was really good, and you could kind of see where the rubber latex stopped, but the color matching under the eyes and everything, you still got the expressiveness in the eyes, which was his eyes sparkled, and that was really needed and necessary for that character. As kind of a sort of grounding force for Alex being suddenly thrust in outer space. It was really just another wonderful character in that film.
Cave on wheels that doesn't go anywhere.
It doesn't go anywhere.
Great explanation. What it felt like to me, too, is that these aliens felt like they didn't just... Was it me, Glenn, or did it feel like they actually maybe wrote up a little biography for each of these aliens before they designed them, rather than just saying, let's make a cool mask? Even the guys that are just sitting in their chairs, did it feel like to you like there maybe was a little history with them?
I think so. I think they made up some little thing of, why, let's give each of these people like a little personality.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, and well, with the tentacle one, when he steps on the guy's tentacle, and Centauri, was it Centauri who makes a comment, or I'm trying to remember now, is it
No,
Greg
it's
who makes a
the
comment?
bug dude that's sitting next
Bug
to him.
dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, with the big eyes.
That's right.
With
Yeah.
He,
And it's, you know, you
They
can see
love
that
to fight. It's why they're perfect for this war.
yeah, you gave them a little, you know, a little personality.
yeah, and that's why I like that too. Is that it just seemed like there was care taken in this film on how they approached it, how they just weren't trying to make the film. They were trying to do the best they could with what they had, and you could just tell everyone was behind this film. And for me, I think it just I love this film so much. It is one of my top all-time favorite, watch it all the time type of films. And I think even with the cheesy, well, not cheesy, but by today's standards, really animated, cartoony-looking special effects, even if you don't grow up at that time, I think the characters are so good in this film
Oh, absolutely.
that you can look past that.
Yeah.
I think by the time you get to the part where you see a lot of special effects and probably the cleanest break in a base destroyer in the history of sci-fi,
Jagged lines.
yeah, by the time you get to that, though, you don't care because you've got your snake oil salesman, Preston in there. You're invested in Alex and his feelings with Mags, and you're so into these characters. So by the time you get to where all the effects are happening, I don't think you care. I think they design it in such a way where you're like, okay, I want to see more with the people. This is great, special effects and the guns firing, but what's going to happen to the people? I mean,
Well, when you talk about the broken station, that's at the point where Centauri's bleeding out. So you've got that whole emotional investment of, God, is he going to make it to the base? Are they just going to crash outside? What's happening? And it's just shown for a brief moment, and then you're back in the car, and Centauri's like starting to fall over.
Yeah, so, and there's that actually touching moment with them, until the next dimension. I'm like, I love that scene.
Yeah.
If they were to update, say, like in 50 years, they decide that they want to redo the graphics in this movie, would it hurt the movie more, do you think, if they redid the graphics? Because the story
don't mess with it. I'm of the opinion that, at some point, an artist never really wants to abandon a project. I mean, I understand where Lucas was coming from when he was doing the special editions. I still think it was a mistake, because one of the most frustrating things you have to do as an artist is, I think, there is a moment where, you know what, if you got your cut out there, if you got basically the essentials, if it even was like maybe 70 to 80% of what you wanted, there's a time you need to walk away from it, because there's a danger of going over it and going over it and going over it and not really adding anything to the film itself, and even possibly diluting some of its homespun charm. Like I said, these things looked like a computer effects when they made it. We didn't care.
Exactly.
So I like that the spaceships were green. What
were you gonna say, Brad?
Well, I think my only counter to that would be is, I think if you redid the graphics, the graphics weren't. Looking at Lucas and Lucas's approach, it was the wow effect. It needed to look a certain way. It was about the look. With The Last Starfighter, it really felt like it was more about the story and the characters, and you were just really, the way that whole thing is designed, you're so involved with the characters that, when you see the jagged lines of the broken space station, you're like, oh yeah, it's broken. Whatever. If you were to update the textures on that, I don't think it would take anything away from it necessarily.
I agree, but I don't think it needs to be done either.
No. It's one of those things where, for the love of God, don't touch it. Don't.
That's why I said 50 years into the future, when we're all like senile.
Let's face it, even for back then, and I will say even by today's standards, who doesn't want a freaking Gunstar?
Yes.
The Gunstar design was fantastic, and it was made up. And we're talking back then, folks, 870,000 polygons. Okay, in a time where you needed a huge computer to render just a little, this thing was made up of a massive amount of polygons, and it looked fantastic. It was like, I don't care about what anything else looked like. You know, the base ship, the Kodan ship looked very basic, but that Gunstar, man, that they put details. And if you look at the behind the scenes on the Blu-ray, they drew out entire schematics for the Gunstar. They have the guy who designed that stuff, and it's just crazy.
And it moved realistically too. I mean, it didn't.
And it moved.
Yeah.
Yeah, it moved like you wanted a spaceship to move. It didn't just move in a 2D plane. It moved.
Didn't bank and.
The other thing too, and I want to throw this in here, is that the folks that designed the Gunstar also did work on Babylon 5.
Aha, see?
Well, that makes
That
sense.
makes sense.
So some of the ship design was sort of loosely based on that, and some of the physics. They wanted to keep that a little bit truer with the motion in space and whatnot. So
Inertia, yeah.
Definitely. Well, I think we've shown that the last Starfighter. Yeah.
Can I just say one thing? I want to say one thing that I just didn't get a chance to mention. I know we need to move on to two other movies and stuff, but one thing that really needs to be celebrated about this movie, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right, so if anybody who knows, please correct me. Craig Stefan, his music.
Oh, the music.
In his film.
Yes.
He had to create a rousing adventure score for a science fiction epic. It is one of the best of the era. I mean, every single bit that he uses. I mean, when you have the rousing theme, then you have the emotional theme, you have a love theme, you have the theme when Grig's looking at his. I mean, there is not one false note on that entire soundtrack. Craig Swan's score is incredible, and I don't think I think it's gotten more due than most of his scores have, but it's a masterwork. It's fantastic. People go through their entire lives in soundtrack work and never achieve anything as good as the soundtrack to this film.
That opening theme is so memorable, and it just sucks you. You're like, oh my god, I want to watch this movie now. I mean,
it's magic right away. It feels magical, you know.
It's such a full score for a movie like this. And I agree. I mean, it does sound 80. It does sound a bit dated. Let's not.
Oh, I think it's great. I think it's fantastic.
Still, I will agree. Out of that early mid 80s, it's not Williams attached to it work or Horner or the big names. It is a really phenomenal soundtrack that really fits the movie. Dawn,
I actually wish more people today would actually listen to that soundtrack and take a note and cheer up a bit. But sorry, go ahead, Don.
They do have the company that releases extended soundtracks has released an extended version of the last Starfighter soundtrack.
Ooh,
limited edition. It's the links on Catherine Mary Stewart's Facebook page. So,
cool.
Dawn, what'd you think of the music, though? I want to get your opinion quick.
Excuse me. Yeah, I too thought it was extremely effective and instantly recognizable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have an actual main theme in there, which, in all honesty, folks, nowadays for scores, it's harder to pick a main theme. It's harder to find that main theme in most of the modern scores, but back in the 80s, especially for this film, you know what the theme is. And it does stand out. And I think we've proven that The Last Starfighter is near and dear to everyone's heart here. If you haven't watched it, watch it on the Blu-ray. Blu-ray's beautiful. It's fantastic. It's fun. You'll love it. Guaranteed. If you're a fan of sci-fi at all, I really think you need to put this on your list, regardless of the fact that it's from 1984, because you get into the movie so much you don't really care if anything looks dated, because it's just a fun. Good movie. It's just a pure fun movie with some heart to it and some care. Moving, which is kind of interesting because it's kind of a not opposite, but the next film I want to talk about, which was in '85, is a film brought to us by probably a lot of our favorite director, Joe Dante, and it's called Explorers. Now, Explorers is it's got big names in here. If you weren't aware, you've got Mr. Ethan Hawke, who before he was doing Boyhood, in this film he's got his own Boyhood, where he is a boy named Ben Crandall who is obsessed with aliens, who starts dreaming of circuit boards, and his buddy Wolfgang, played by River Phoenix, helps him design this circuit board, and along with another friend Darren, they end up designing a spaceship that takes them to outer space. Glenn, Explorers, your thought on this film?
How much would you pay for a film like this? $50? $100? Yeah. I had completely forgotten this movie, so when we picked it, I'm like, I don't think I've seen this movie. And I started watching it, and the whole beginning part I'm watching, I'm like, nothing's clicking with me. I don't remember any of it. And then as soon as the alien shows up, I'm like, I remember this thing now. Yeah. Yeah, this was definitely different. Yeah.
It is. It's an out there for this type of film during that time. It's out there.
Yeah, it is. And being older now, looking back on it, the whole aspect that these aliens, their only real knowledge of us is from TV, which when I was rewatching it, I'm seeing that, and it made me think of another great '80s classic, Flash Gordon.
Yeah.
Where Ming makes a comment of how we just kind of like throw ourselves out into space. That's kind of what we do with our TV. We just throw our TV signals out there, and I'm thinking of if there are aliens out there, that's what they know of us.
Yeah.
Oh, those poor people.
Yeah,
we are a noisy planet. But yeah, this one, out of all the ones, it boggles my mind. And Brad, your thoughts on Explorers? This one really is just different.
We're kind of going in order to my most favorite to least favorite films.
Sure.
And Explorers, the thing about Explorers, at the heart of it, it's the relationship of parents with their children.
Mm-hmm.
Even when you get towards the end of the film, and like the two kid aliens and this huge alien shows up, and Darren's like, that's the dad.
Yeah.
You get to see Wolfgang's dad, who's also an inventor. You get to hear Darren's dad, who seems to be an overbearing kind of guy. That was the thing that always kind of struck home with me is that portion of it.
Mm-hmm.
The fantastical elements of having that circuit beamed into Ethan Hawke's character's head, kind of flimsy. Another use of 3D, which is kind of interesting. But it's sad that the film didn't do that well in the box office. But for my money, Thunder Road is probably one of my favorite kid-made space vehicles.
Yeah, it is. It's really cool, made out of a tilt-a-whirl and stuff. That I love the design of that ship.
The other thing that I hope nobody glossed over was the fact that the one older guy, and I'm trying to remember
Charlie Dick
Miller,
played by Dick Miller.
Yes, he was Ben Crandall years before. He had that beamed into his head, and he just didn't either know the right people or just wasn't able to make that thing happen. So I thought that was really kind of a fascinating thing that kind of added a little bit more weight and made the film a little bit more interesting, that it's an ongoing thing, this contact.
Mm-hmm.
So those are the main things that really kind of resonated with me. But God, I wanted Thunder Road. I still do.
On that note, Brad, that the part of me wonders is, was it those same alien kids? Was it possibly like their dad who tried contacting him all those years before?
Yeah.
It's something I thought about. I'm like, and his kids now stumbled upon the same stuff that he used to transmit that, and then they did the same thing.
Right.
It's possible.
Yeah,
That's a good
because
idea.
the dad didn't seem too surprised that humans were there. He seemed just more pissed off. So
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because the kids took his car without asking.
yeah,
And the other thing
and,
too
and we're
is,
engaging in interspecies relations.
yeah.
oh, it was on. It was on.
Paris!
It really kind of felt like they were gearing up to make sequels.
Yes.
Oh, I
You know, with the end of the film, with the more enhanced circuit being beamed
Mhm.
into their brains to do something bigger and better, and then the addition of the fourth explorer,
Yes.
Ben's now girlfriend. It really seemed like they were gearing up to do something more, and it's a shame
Yes.
that it never really happened.
Yeah, I agree. And you mentioned the girlfriend, so I want to go right to Dawn because Dawn mentioned something to me while she was watching this, so I wanted to get her.
Oh,
Dawn,
yeah, I did not like
Dawn,
the movie.
your thoughts with Explorers? Go.
Did not. I really did not connect with this movie, and it was specifically that end with the addition of the girlfriend that really tweaked me the worst. There are definite good aspects to the movie, which you've mentioned, but this movie was definitely targeted at boys. And the only reason the girl was added as an explorer was because the boy wanted her. She was his prize for getting into outer space. And oh my God.
I didn't really think about that till you brought it up, but now you look at it, he doesn't win the girl until he goes into outer space and she starts getting the
And
signals.
he sends that projection into her brain. That's how he wins her.
Yeah, I picked up on that this last time watching where I'm watching I'm going, so he just knocked all the bottles down with the ball and he wins this prize. Here you go.
Talk about a
You went to
big
space.
fucking
Boom.
briefie.
Here's a character we didn't really develop at all. You got to look at her through a window, and she got to look concerned when he got beat up. That's all the development she had up until then.
They were trying to make a Peter Pan ending. That's what they were trying to do.
Well,
They were trying to go in kind of for that Peter Pan feel.
if you don't mind saying, and that's actually, those are all valid points and everything. I think that, and of course this is just a guess. I can't say this with any authority. I don't think any of us can. But they might have had more in store for the character. This film was not supposed to be released in July of 1985. This film was supposed to. This film had months and months and months to go, and there's apparently a lot of footage that's left on the cutting room floor. It may have been, but again, you can't say it for sure. It may have been a possibility that she was more developed before the studio basically took the movie away from Joe Dante and says, you know what? Spielberg-type movies are really big, and going to be this big this summer. We're going to have Back to the Future. We're going to have Goonies. We're going to have all this stuff. We'd like one, too. We've got a movie. It's called Daryl. It's not very good. We're going to take this movie, and this is just... They took the movie away from him, so he never got to do his cut, and there's apparently a ton of footage. I almost want to see that there's something, because there are certain parental roles. Like, for instance, Wolfgang's parents, they are as eccentric as ever, but then you have Ethan Hawke, who makes the offhanded comment to Darren there, or whatever. I don't know if I'm sorry.
You're.
And he says, yeah, my parents, they get along okay, I guess, but they just talk about the stupidest things. It's like one of those things. Like, yeah, you start focusing on adulthood. You stop exploring the idea.
Yeah.
And this kind of had the promise towards the end that the exploration would actually go on throughout their lives. And when you do that, you want to share that with the people you care about. I can't say for sure whether the storyline ever stopped being creepy.
Mhm.
I'd like to believe it did.
The
But
director
it
even
might be
said,
wishful thinking. Yeah.
well, no, I think you're right because the director said in one of his interviews that the movie could have gone in two different directions, and based on the amount of shots that they actually did do, and because they didn't have any effect shots done, and because the movie was taken away from him, they basically cut it, and they did a lot of looping
Mhm.
of scenes, and so they ended up getting this movie that was really not that completed. Like the
Mhm.
whole third act wasn't even developed.
Mhm.
And it kind of feels that way. And I mean, not only that, there's just the creep. There is a Don brought it up, and thank you, Don, for bringing it up. I mean, this film wasn't creepy already for me, and then and then you brought up this angle, and then I was looking at it more as I was watching it. And no, I meant that in a good way because I was catching things like the whole creepy stalker vibe of, hey, stick me in a bubble and I'm going to stare at her through a window.
That is weird.
Mhm.
I even reviewed this a couple of years ago, and I said that scene does play a bit creepy. Yeah.
That scene is
That,
just...
in addition to that psychic roofie, it just killed me. It just, that was it.
Oh, you're worse than you guys are getting worse than Michael Bay for destroying my childhood. Come on, don't do this anymore.
We're not saying it's a bad film, but you can tell there's issues with it, and now it makes more sense when you talk about how it was taken away from Joe Dante, because it really seems a little clunky, for lack of a better term.
I think the third act is clunky. You know,
Yes, it is.
for me, the first. I mean, I actually love the first 2/3 of Explorer, and this is the
Mhm.
one film that I didn't get
Yeah.
to see in theaters. I was begging to see Explorers in theaters, and this actually, I was mentioning the Spielberg thing. It started as a Spielberg production, and then it just wasn't.
Right.
And it should have stayed there because he would have probably treated Dante with a little more respect if Spielberg's name was attached to it. But the first like 2/3, I love the bits of them getting to know each other and talking about their dreams and
Mhm.
building this
Mhm.
amazing thing. When they get to space, it makes an interesting point about how kind of things in the universe might be the same on Earth. You still
Right.
you still want to get out there and do your thing. You still have the overbearing parents, but it really doesn't feel fleshed out, and so the
Mhm.
third act really doesn't work for me. For those first two acts, I think are incredible.
Well, the way they build it up too. I mean, you could tell there's got to be stuff sitting somewhere on the floor because
Oh yeah,
the
we've
way
never seen it. I don't know if we ever will.
the way the 2/3 of this film build up, you're really waiting for something kind of epic and cool, and then they get there, and it just seems odd, like it's a completely different movie. They're going through these odd, environments and that, and I know they were trying to set up as an alien, but still, it felt, yeah, not complete. Like they were just throwing ideas out there to try to get it done. On a positive note, though, I do like the cast in here. Not only do you have Ethan Hawke and River Phoenix, but the parents as well. You've got a young James Cromwell
Yeah.
as Wolfgang's parents. Dad, I
Who would
love...
later become Zephyrin Cochran.
Yes,
And he was basically playing another nerd because the year before he was in Revenge of the Nerds as the dad. And he was basically like, if you could imagine like a German version of that character, that's who James Cromwell was.
And we mentioned Dick Miller already, but there was also Meshack Taylor in here for those who watched Designing Women, who was on for a long time. He was the cop in here, and I love that too. That was also felt something that wasn't quite completed. Like I think it was Glenn mentioned or whatever with Dick Miller's character. It felt like they started something with that, but never went too far with it outside of a off comment,
Way to
about
go, kid.
yeah, way to go, kid, and dream, and that was it. It like dropped there, and you're like, it seemed like there was more with the cops there as well. With that, and it felt like they wanted to do more with the police as well, that they didn't. So, and then those alien designs. In all honesty, when I was younger, this film kind of scared me a little. Those aliens were just a bit creepy and slimy. And, who's that? Robert Picardo in here, another Star Trek link. Holy cow! They're the Star Trek links in here. You got Robert Picardo in here, who did, I think he did the voice for Bach. Yes. He did the voice for that, and I thought he did phenomenal. But he also plays another role in here, and it's a film I would have loved to see played out.
Oh, God.
Star Killer. Now, Star Killer is the cheesy 50s throwback film that plays on the screen and on the TV and everywhere. And Picardo plays Star Killer. Who here wanted to see Star Killer be a full movie?
Yeah,
Star Killer was my type of film all over the place. I mean, because, well, let's face it, I do an entire freaking show on YouTube and Vimeo that basically says Star Killer is my type of film. Is because I love Space Hunter, I love Metal Storm, I love all those Battle Beyond the Stars and stuff. And then they say that it's also got nudity in it, which I was a fan of. You know,
that was a great line. She's got. Does she get naked in it? Well, yeah, but she's got 3 navels.
Yeah.
Which again leads to Dawn's, talking about how this whole thing is so geared towards boys. It's crazy, even more so than the other films that we talked about in here. I mean, and you also have those standard 80s kids movie themes. You've got the kid with the broken household. You got the kid with the crazy parents. You got the bullying. You got the nerd thing going on. You got Darren, who's kind of the mysterious kid who helps protect the other kids, but no one's really know what to make of him. He's the guy with the motorbike, and he works at. I mean, you've got all these really classic kind of cliche 80s kids tropes in here, don't you? To go along with this, wouldn't you say, Paul, that you do have all those basic themes?
Yes, definitely. And I have to be honest. The reason why I was probably protesting a little bit too much was I did have a crush on the Amanda Peterson. Yeah. So I was kind of creepy, I guess, back in the day too. So.
Paul was the boy.
Having a crush is one thing. Floating outside someone's window is something that would be different.
Apparently, River
now
Phoenix...
I can make that hair doll.
Apparently, River Phoenix did have a kind of a minor crush on her, and kind of was upset when Ethan Hawke actually, she was interested in Ethan Hawke. So
you kind of got that vibe.
Yeah.
Again, a number of those things in here that.
My God! In the Reality Bites world, River Phoenix was Ben Stiller. Wanted Winona, she goes for Ethan. Son of a bitch, that hipster. Really?
Well, it's just interesting. Here we've got Joe Dante, who did Gremlins, Piranha, Howling, Rock and Roll High School, and he does Explorers, and now that you mentioned that it got taken away from him, that explains so much with this movie, because it seems like it could have been more and better, and it was decent, but I just remember it being that really bizarre, weird kids sci-fi film. Out of all the ones that came out that are geared towards children, this one really was out there and different, and not the greatest, but I liked it because of the Thunder Road, in all honesty. I loved it because of Thunder Road. You do have ILM special effects in here dealing with and the whole ball thing was really cool. And who wanted that computer? That super computer that ran off a 9-volt battery?
Yes.
Brad, you wanted.
That field is only powered with this. Just that look in Darren's eyes, like, yeah, let's kick that up to 12 volts, get you a car battery, bang, we'll get that done.
At least one, if not 2 car batteries.
A computer at that point in time being powered by a 9-volt battery. I'm like, is that the future is here.
They make a comment about that though, where he says, yeah, I put the stuff in there, but it's not going to work. I mean, you'd have to get a way more powerful computer, and then all of a sudden the readouts start coming up.
Yeah.
Almost planned like that. Like, yeah, we're even stupid little you, we can run this on your little counter. once once Xbox happens, you can take over the universe.
Man, can you imagine what you could design with an Xbox based off of your phone? You could
I
run
keep
this-
thinking of Iron Sky,
Yes.
slapping in the cell phone into that ancient Nazi technology. It's like, oh, now we can take over the world.
Well, and he drops the one line. The computer only has 128K, but that should be enough. I mean,
Yeah.
like, my phone would not even blink, and you could design the sphere from the aliens. So,
But God, like at that point in time, the Commodore 64 was the thing.
yeah.
That was 64K, and then they came out with the Commodore 128, and everybody's like,
Mhm.
oh my God, what am I going to do with all this power?
2 megahertz. You turned off the graphics.
And right now I'm sitting next to a dual core Pentium, that would just totally bury that thing.
So imagine you could go visit the TV aliens up in space, with your computer, with your phone. just
I'm gonna do that. Hold on. I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna get my thing working here so I can go see the girl with the big cheeks. Because I mean, let's face it, it ain't happening for me down here.
What does it say too? Again, that brings it, Dawn. This is why you're awesome, because you mentioned that, and then you've got that whole thing with Wolfgang. He can't get a girl on Earth, but by God, he can get himself an alien woman. How many times did we see that in the 80s sci-fi film?
He's like a young
a
James
total
T.
boy.
Kirk.
It is a total boy adolescent fantasy. It really is. It is. I don't say that disparagingly, but it is. I mean, just in the same way that as I mentioned earlier, True Romance would be the R-rated adolescent fantasy.
One thing too. Oh, go ahead, Paul.
I was just going to say, it was good for people like me because I was kind of a geek back in the day. I wasn't the pretty guy. I wasn't the guy that was like the guy that rode the motorcycle. That could have been me. Yeah, it would have been the alien with big cheeks that talked like Marilyn Monroe, but still, I had a chance, right?
Again,
right.
That's
me now.
Here's a prime example of culture affecting affecting pop culture, though, because here you have a film, and a number of these films, like Dawn mentioned, are geared towards boys because they're sci-fi. Because back then, I mean, we all growing up during that time, back then, at least in the media, we knew it, but in the media coming at you, they didn't equate sci-fi girls into sci-fi. If you had a girl who was into sci-fi, into something other than the traditional quote-unquote girl things, which I think is wrong, but back then, the mentality of the media providers is that, oh, we have to gear these towards the young boys because they're the only ones that would be interested in a spaceship flying.
Well, that still happens today.
Right.
Like Young Justice, one of my new favorite cartoons, did very well ratings-wise, but they found out in the ratings that it was starting to skew more towards girls, and girls don't buy the toys, so they pulled the plug on it.
Oh,
so I mean, that still happens to this day.
It does. It does. I mean, they found out where you mentioned video games earlier with Last Starfighter. They found that what's the figure I said that like half? They said something like half of video game players are women.
Right.
Look at the games out there; they're not geared towards women. And in fact, when they started having journalists come out there, you had women being horribly attacked by people there.
It's still going on. It's still going on.
And in the 80s especially, and then of course naturally before that as well, it was very hard to find any film, especially any film that was based in like adventure or anything like that, where the woman in the film wasn't there to be either at least partially or completely the girlfriend. Right. You know, that's all she was. You know, you have Kroll. You know, why was there a woman in Kroll? Well, because they needed somebody to rescue.
Legend.
You know,
Legend.
Yeah. So, like.
Now, but you could argue that, well, with the fantasy movies, you could argue Labyrinth
Mm-hmm.
because
True.
Yeah.
she was very strong, and the
That
Never-Ending
was
Story, the girl was the princess.
Yes, she
Queen
was. You're
Don't
right.
forget Alien.
And don't
But,
forget
but,
Alien.
but I really think that these were, but I feel that these were anomalies, and I think we remember them because they were so out of the ordinary as well, weren't they?
Well, in Labyrinth, she was the inept babysitter.
She was the daughter.
I mean,
That was a creepy movie.
it's a bit, well, that cod piece alone that David Bowie's wearing is frickin' criminal.
But yeah, they didn't really have a lot of young sci-fi movies that were more female themed. But there are two, and even you still get it today. This is funny. We're talking about films 30 years ago, and you look at the themes in here and the things that weren't addressed, and it's still happening today, including anti-intellectualism.
Oh yeah.
Is huge in the 80s, and you still see it today. In these films especially Last Starfighters and Explorers. Last Starfighter, you've got Alex being razzed because he wants to go to something other than city college, than community college. Here in Explorers, we have Wolfgang severely picked on. Guy's brilliant, and he's the nerd. He's and anybody else is afraid to show that they know stuff because they're going to get picked on by the Steve Jackson gang.
I used to see that. I used to see that quite a bit when I was growing up, actually.
And you still have that anti-intellectualism going on today in the films, where that's kind of looked down upon and it's addressed, and you're looking at it going, wow, some things really don't change too much. And Explorers, like I said, I wanted to bring it up because it was kind of that odd film that some people forget was out there, and kind of good reason. It's not the most lovable and endearing one, but it does have a place, I think, with the special effects and the things it addresses, and the fact that you got Joe Dante in it along with Ethan Hawke and River Phoenix. And I just want to say that here you had Jerry Goldsmith doing the music too, so you had a big name back then doing the score versus Last Starfighter, which you had Craig Stefan, who did a lot, but he wasn't as common of a name. But one other thing too is they ripped off stuff from Tron, like the sound effects and the graphics. It felt like they went and raided Disney's special effects cache to put out there. I mean, the kids step out of the spaceship, and I'm like, holy shit, they're playing Discs of Tron. So Explorers, I think we all agree, is kind of that odd young sci-fi film that could have been so much more, and in the end is kind of that creepy sci-fi film out there that it is enjoyable, and you can see the appeal. And for me, I remembered it again because it was geared towards boys, and so that's why I think it appealed to me, is because for when I was growing up, I mean, it came out in '85. I was 10. Yeah, so I was nearly as old as Ben, and I was into sci-fi, and he was into sci-fi, and so there was that connection. And then I think we'll move on then to Flight of the Navigator, Disney Flight of the Navigator. Though Disney didn't actually make this film, they picked it up. It was an independent film that I think Disney actually picked up.
Yeah, PSO did it.
Yeah. Paul, your initial thoughts with Flight of the Navigator?
It was out of the three my favorite.
Really?
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I know. Like, a lot of people didn't think it because it was kind of a kiddish thing, but to me, it was just like doing that joyride. Just like first time that you were on your bicycle, or first time that you got into a car, and you got full control of where you wanted to go, and that's what this movie was like to me. So.
Yeah, it definitely stood out for me as well. Paul, what about you? Flight of the Navigator. How did you feel about it?
I felt pretty good.
I mean, Scott. Wow.
Oh.
Sorry.
Me? Okay. Hi.
Let me try that again. Thank you, Paul. Scott, what did you think of Flight of the Navigator? Oh, you're right next to each other, so.
It was all right. Again, when I was, and this is the same thing with Explorers, where when I was a kid and saw Explorers, my favorite part was that last bit because it was like, ooh, shiny. Everything was like, it was finally we're in space. But, now I think that the early parts of Explorers were better. Same story here is like when I was a kid, all right, just get to the spaceship, get to the thing. I'm watching it again. I watched it just last night, probably for the first time in I'd say like 10, 15 years. And I thought, actually this early stuff where this kid goes missing for he falls down a little hill or something,
Ravine.
and he's knocked out. Thank you, Ravine. Yeah, he gets knocked out, and he wakes up 8 years later. He doesn't know what it is, and suddenly he's got star charts in his brain, and that's actually more interesting to me than the stuff with the spaceship in the movie. Once he got to the stuff with the spaceship, I'm like, it's all right a little. And once even though I have great love for Pee-wee's Big Adventure, once the voice actually turned to not just Paul Rubens but Pee-wee Herman,
Took you out of it, though.
I'm watching it now. I'm like, oh, wow, that's a nasty side effect. He actually turned the alien intelligence stupid.
It was kind of the
really stupid.
It was kind of the feel that he took it down a few IQ notches.
Well, he's such a jerk too. I mean, for one thing, he's like taking and studying all these creatures and putting them back where they go and doing all this research. Next, he's just popping his little tentacle out of the spaceship and for no reason, like making some fun of some poor guy for his weight. Dude, I think his name's Big Al. I think he's made peace with his weight by this point, okay? And he's like, too many Twinkies. Like, you son of... Like, wow. They are among us. And you know what? They're kind of assholes.
Don, what about you?
I too like the whole
Time travel thing, or?
Yeah, well,
Jordan?
the time travel thing. I like that it seemed like they had it figured out as to why. It seemed like they had it figured out, at least the storytellers had it figured out mathematically as to why it would happen, light speed and all that. Because I'm kind of a Star Trek geek, and I enjoyed that because the math was there.
Mm-hmm.
In the whole process, and it was a very pretty shiny ship.
It was a pretty shiny ship. I liked the design of the ship. Actually, I always did. And here we had liquid metal before liquid metal was cool, aka Terminator 2, with the steps of the ship. So yeah, what about you, Brad? You said this was your least favorite.
If I had my choice between watching this movie again and getting hit in the genitals with a baseball bat repeatedly, I would pick out my own Louisville Slugger.
Oh,
it's the whole 10% thing again, isn't it?
God damn it!
Yes.
Hey, Paul. Just to let you know, though, real quick, Paul. You know how I probably felt with how you feel right now. That was me with Little Witches.
I know. Okay, let's not talk about Little Witches. Anyway, Brad, getting back to hitting
Sorry,
yourself
Brad,
in the
go ahead.
testicles.
The one thing I do appreciate is the fact that they address moving faster than speed of light, like Don mentioned, and the time differences that there would be. That there's this 8 years of difference in. He's been gone for this period of time, but he hasn't aged. Okay, I'll give you that. That's kudos to you. But the 10% to this day, and even now that I'm older, it riles. I mean, that was one of my biggest criticisms of Lucy is the whole perpetuation of the 10% BS that doesn't exist. But I didn't like the character. I didn't like. I don't like David. And
he's not exactly out of all the movies I will say that we watched for your lead young male, he is probably the least charismatic out of all of them. So I can see that.
And the other thing too. Well, the other thing too is all the flying. To me, out of the other films, there was it felt like there was more plot. There was more done on the front end in character development, and you actually come to care about the characters, and the effects were add-ons. But to me, the Flight of the Navigator, they really went, balls to the wall in the flight. That there's a lot of flying around and all that, and I just the whole nutshell to me, it's just like, God, I wanted the movie to end. It was an hour and a half of my life I will never get back.
And to expand on that, what really bothered me was they get lost. He can go back in time and drop each and every animal out to the minute they were taken, but he can't find Florida?
Well, that, and David could be vaporized if he's taken back to his point in time. What? Really? I call horse shit on that.
about the Florida thing though, he mentions that he once he's downloaded the star charts, the only thing that he remembers is what David can remember.
Right.
So since David didn't know how to get back,
they try to explain that away.
Yeah, I know it was a cheap explanation.
It's that section on that continent that looks like a big jutting penis.
Yeah.
You can't miss it, really.
But he got a D in geography or something, so he wouldn't know.
And if you've ever been to Florida, a lot of the people behave like that, too.
So
I live there right now, pod people. Man.
So, I mean, I just...
Yeah.
Nothing to me really made me happy that I watched this film.
Well, that's interesting that you say that, Brad. For me, I enjoyed it. Again, here we have a kid who's exactly the same age I was when he was, so I had that connection with him, and I wanted to fly a spaceship. I loved the spaceship. What is interesting about this spaceship, this movie compared to the last Starfighter, shows you where they went in 2 years, though, with special effects. If you look at these two films, I mean, the Starfighter, the in Flight of the Navigator ship is pretty freaking cool by itself. Let's forget about the story for a minute, though. You got Howard Hessman in here as Louis Faraday, the scientist. Like, wow, whose parents were cruel. But that spaceship was cool. That design, that idea of the liquid type of taking its own shape in that was kind of the first time you saw something like that in a film. But the special effects for that were pretty cool. But one of the things I thought, too, is it felt like the lease wasn't quite up yet on the set of Daryl, so they had to find some other use for it. So they did not feel like they were on the Daryl set for when David was trapped in there with Sarah Jessica Parker, a young Sarah Jessica Parker. It felt like Daryl so much in that. Complete with the lunch.
Because they've got him hooked up and he's like doing computer readouts. I got a Daryl flashback too. Yeah, absolutely.
And then you got the lunch cart robot. I'm like, holy crap! Am I watching Daryl here or what?
Ralph.
But here's something I want to throw out to you guys, and the reason I left this to last is because there really isn't a huge amount to talk about this film. What I will say, compared to the other films, but what I will say with this film, and it's something that I noticed, with him starting at 78 and going to 86, would you say that maybe they made this film as a wink, nudge, poke fun at pop culture? Because look at the sheer volume of pop culture references that are made from when David was in 78 to when he shows up. You've got the Coke joke. You've got him looking at MTV going, what the hell am I looking at? In all honesty, this felt under the surface like Disney making a statement of how odd and strange our pop culture has, as well as consumerism. Am I off on that? I mean, Paul, what would you say?
Yeah, that actually, now that you brought that up, I would notice that. Yes, definitely. I would agree with you.
I mean, because he points out they have a remote control TV. Yeah. And look when he gets in that room, all the shit that he's given, that
Yeah.
he's like, I didn't
Comments
even
on
watch
Twisted Sister.
comments on Twisted Sister. I mean, Don, would you say that maybe Disney was trying to kind of make a statement about the current culture of children?
Either Disney or what was the company? PSO?
PSO,
Yeah.
Producer
Yeah.
Sales Organization. It
Yeah,
was a Mark
it was-
Twain's company.
Because
Somebody was
Disney's like
definitely
the
making a
temple
statement.
of pop culture crap.
Well, yeah.
Mm.
But would you say, Don, that that's a statement maybe they were trying to make?
Yeah, definitely.
You know,
Definitely.
I mean, even with the Big Al T-shirt, he makes an ET joke
Yeah.
of,
He
you know,
phoned
he's
home.
trying to phone home, and the guard is reading Gorky Park. He's reading the book Gorky Park, and it's specifically in shot. You know, for me, there's just so many pop culture references, and the fact that he was 78 to, you know, to the current time made me feel like there was that statement that look at how crazy we've come in only this amount of time. Whether or not that's good or bad, I'm not sure. I kind of got the vibe they were almost saying it was bad.
Well, you know, and I don't know. Maybe some of you guys would disagree with this, but I think they because it's said that this is not his time. He belongs back in 1978, and his favorite bands seem to be the Bee Gees and the Beach Boys. So, yeah, your taste in music is terrible, David. Yeah, you belong back in 1978.
To me, the message was pop culture
go.
grounds us in time.
Oh, okay.
Oh, interesting.
If we are all at around the same age, we are all capable of making certain pop culture references, and we'll go, oh yeah. Now, I go to work and I work with people that are like, 20, 25 years younger than me. Not a big deal, but occasionally I'll throw something out that, y'all would get, but they just look at me like, who are you, old man? Where did you come from?
Earlier tonight, I was taking the niece and nephew home, and I was commenting on something that I had mentioned to my folks before. Is that I said, Ma, you don't get it. The kids back there, because they're spouting off all like the little chat things they've done, all the computer things they've done, and my mom's kind of lost. I said, Ma, you forget it. All these people are trying to figure out what's the next movie or TV show that we can hook kids with, and kids today don't care about that. They don't care about movies or TV shows. They care about Vines, about YouTube videos. It's a completely different era where and it sounds like even though I have a web series, it still sounds like gibberish to me when a lot of them talk. I think you're on the right track there, Brad. Absolutely. And of course, this is what 30 years after Flight of the Navigator, and David was just dealing with 8. Yeah.
Yeah. And the fact that, and I hate to sound like the old curmudgeon, but I mean, I keep up with stuff in comics and pop culture and whatnot, so I'm not left behind on the majority of stuff. But if you just, and I think that's the thing that the film points out, you're gone for 8 years. If you were to, say, go to Tibet and live as a monk and just totally remove yourself from everything, and then come back, everything would be so foreign to you in an 8-year span or whatever, because you are no longer connected to the conversation that everybody in your peer group or whatever is having. You would feel completely lost.
In addition to that, though, he was like from 12 to 20, so he lost his entire teenage years. And I think that's important as well.
Well, yeah, because he didn't grow up during the time of the developing pop culture that affects you the most when you're a teenager. And teenagers are affected. They're the core demographic for that pop culture growth and affected. And he was kind of the guy out of time, so to speak, and he didn't like it. It was actually scary for him even. I mean, watching the music video, and what's funny is seeing the music video through his eyes. Growing up in the 80s, I'm like, yeah, that's a normal 80s video, but thinking of it through his eyes, I'm like, yeah, okay, I can see where that would be pretty doggone creepy, The guys.
Oh, go ahead, I'm sorry.
The guy's limbs bending, and Sarah Jessica Parker, and but anyway.
Sarah Jessica Parker is still creepy to me.
And you look at even more currently, like the Captain America story,
Mm-hmm.
and how he's completely jarred. He was locked in ice for 70 years. You had that person out of time, and that's kind of a very scary thing to have the rest of the world move on without you.
Yeah.
And losing that grounding factor of not being a part of the conversation that everybody else is. It's like everybody's in on a joke and you have no idea what's going on,
Right.
and
even
you feel the fool for it.
and
That,
even
that,
more
that
than
doesn't
pop
have
culture.
Aaron Gray to look at to make him feel better.
And even more than just pop culture, language changes, word meanings
Yeah.
change. Think how long ago was it that the term postal
No.
became a thing?
Uh-huh.
Back in the 80s, that wasn't that postal. What are you sending things by post? U.S. Post? What?
No.
Or how
Um,
about that? Or how about that? Today, geek is actually kind of an affectionate term. Back in the 70s and even the 80s, it was an
Yeah.
insult.
It
Yeah.
was.
Well, yeah, and freaks and geeks, that go a little bit further back than that, referring to Captain America, and you're talking carnival folk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep.
Bites the heads off of chickens. That's what a geek does. Which is not what we do now. We talk about movies. But occasionally I do get a hankering for some KFC, but I prefer my
KFC.
chicken heads cooked. So, and what's funny too, I loved, for me, like you said, with the references to, and everybody made great points. I just put a sign, and the statement about Coke was hilarious. Do you want Coke, new Coke? Because that was even a joke to everybody back then. We were all like, how many versions of Coke are you going to have? And they had a Coke Classic can, which I remember that Coke Classic did taste different than New Coke. New Coke was like a Pepsi ripoff. And, you know,
And what even how good at her job can she be? Seriously, who's gonna say I want a new Coke?
yeah. And she moves to New York and gets some friends and has a TV show. So, but Flight of the Navigator, yeah, I think out of all of these films is probably the shallowest of the films as far as story and plot goes. I mean, if you look at it, it pretty much is a kid joyride in a spaceship. Especially after he downloaded it, it just becomes really more of a joke after joke type of thing than going anywhere with the story. And unfortunately, he gets the brains, he gets the star charts in that within after the first 30 minutes. Now, I do give him props too of having the practical effects for the aliens. Who didn't want a little puffer in for his backpack? The little alien that hangs on your finger. Come on, we all love that.
And well, what was I saying? I was gonna say something. It's
Scott lost his train.
No,
He
here we go.
lost
Okay,
his train.
I got it. Okay. Well, I mean, we were talking about Disney things, and yeah, this did not start as Disney. It started PSO and everything, as we said. But the first part of it feels like like the opening scenes of Escape to Witch Mountain, if you remember.
Yeah. Yes. My friend made a statement about that. Yeah.
It feels like it's very mysterious. There is you're dealing with someone from another world, but it's very mysterious. Like, for instance, in the beginning of that movie, all you know is that there are these kids. They're on the run.
Yeah.
And they can hear the dogs in the background. Of course, we can't hear them, but they have super hearing. I love those scenes from Escape to Witch Mountain. And the early scenes of this kind of had that feel. The other one was just like, let's see, okay, now let's actually see if we can get kids in the seat.
Yeah.
And if you look at the old TV ads, I can't speak for the big trailers, but the old TV ads, a lot of them did not mention that Paul Reubens or Pee Wee Herman was anywhere in this. The alien in that had the normal voice.
Yeah.
In the TV ads, and they didn't use the music from the movie in the ads either. Because I remember going to see this with my mom back when I was like 10 years old, and all of a sudden, the dogs came up in the beginning. I'm like, that's odd. And then when Pee Wee Herman came out, as much as I love Pee Wee's Big Adventure, it's like, oh, damn it all, what the hell is this?
But his name was a cigarette.
Paul Mall, yeah.
Paul Mall.
Was how he was credited, yes.
Oh my god, I didn't even see that. Wow.
Yeah, he's credited as Paul Mall.
Well, yeah, it's like, kids, got a great movie for you. Smoke.
So I think we'll wrap it up here. It's getting late, but this was just what I had hoped for with this. I mean, these are 3 sci-fi films. I think we can all agree, though, that whether or not we liked them or not, kind of stood out for us for those sci-fi films we remember during a decade that was filled with sci-fi. I mean, not only young adult, but older movies, everything. I mean, sci-fi, that was like another 50s golden age of sci-fi for the 80s. Was, only instead of monster films, we were getting, spaceships coming down to Earth, we were all leaving Earth in some way, shape, or form with it. So why don't we I just get a little bit of wrap-up of general thoughts in general with these 3 films. Brad, any final thoughts on these 3 films, like how they maybe defined, sci-fi for young kids? Oh.
I think that Flight of the Navigator aside, the other 2 films really, made it really cool to want to go into space. I mean, I don't think I really. Granted, I saw this a little bit after these had come out, but still, I mean, they really made me want to, or wish that I had had those experiences when I was younger. Mm-hmm. That sense of adventure and that sense of the unknown and just going head first into it, and the excitement that would come with it. It just really did wonderful things, I think, to the genre as a whole, and they upped the bar, and made it more of an important genre, not just schlock crap.
Definitely agree with that. Don, what about you?
I think that they really encouraged a generation of kids to dream big and to really work towards bigger dreams than I think that they'd really thought of before. Mm-hmm. Whether it's the obvious, going to space camp, going to outer space, mm-hmm. Living the dream. I really think the kids that were affected by these movies just really wanted to reach further than ever before.
Sure. Definitely. And Glenn, what about you, sir? Your final thought.
Well, you notice I didn't say much about Flight of the Navigator because I watched it once when I was a kid and just didn't revisit it, and I think I know why I did. But Last Starfighter is I think it stands out from these other ones in that it's one of those. If you grew up in the '80s, this is one of those iconic films. If you like sci-fi even a little bit, this is one of those iconic films. I mean, yes, of course you had Empire Strikes Back and that stuff, but there was so much more that was out there, and this was one of those movies that wasn't Star Wars that still stood out, and I think still stands up. I mean, obviously, the effects, yes. If you show this to a kid today, he'd be like, unless of course you're a cool parent, who raises your kid on this awesome stuff. But yeah, I think that it shows where sci-fi was when you look at where sci-fi is today, where so much of sci-fi today is simply it is style over substance. Mm-hmm. And the 80s was kind of that. With the exception of like Star Wars, you didn't have the giant budget, oh my God, special effects. Unless it was Steven Spielberg or George Lucas, no, it wasn't happening. And it showed that you could still make a good sci-fi movie with, at the time, pretty cutting-edge special effects, even with the, as we said, the jagged lines, and it's, but because you had a good story around it too. You didn't have the crutch of, let's just spend $300 million on effects and then just hire some hobo off the street to write a script. Because everyone's just been looking at the pretty pictures anyway, so it doesn't matter what happens in the story.
Right.
So.
Great. And Paul?
I would like to just kind of add that these three movies are good representation of the 80s and about wanting to leave the Earth because of the space shuttle. Remember? It was big in the 80s. I mean, that's when it really started to take off. And I think everyone was excited about the space shuttle. It's like, okay, this is our thing. We've got an actual spaceship that can go up into space and come back. And so I think kids were interested in that, and I think that's why they made these movies. And I think nowadays we don't see that, because the space shuttle is not around anymore, and I don't think there'll be as much interest about going into space as we did back in the 80s. So it's a shame, but
yeah, I agree as well. And in like in Explorers, he actually puts a little hood ornament that's the shuttle.
Shuttle,
you know? And when you're a kid, you see that, you're like, that's the shuttle. I love the shuttle.
I even had a model of the shuttle. I built it, and it was really neat. I remember that now. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, the space. Now that you mentioned it, the space shuttle was huge back then. Definitely had an effect on us as kids. And Scott, your final thoughts with these three films?
I'm really glad that Paul mentioned the space shuttle, because I was going to mention it too. And as a kid, I was always looking up into the stars. Space exploration is just incredible to me. I love whenever I want to feel close to my God, my creator, whatever force put me here, I look up at the stars and just feel that sense of awe. And a lot of these films did that, and they told you that as anonymous as you were, you could do that, especially the first two films that we've discussed, Last Starfighter and Explorers. And we got a lot of that, and he's absolutely dead on right about the space shuttle and everything. Keep in mind that if you notice, there was Flight of the Navigator and Space Camp and stuff in '86, and then after that there was nothing, because these films were already complete when, in January of '86, we had the Challenger disaster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That can't be overstated. That destroyed the innocence of a lot of people. I still have vivid memories of just a teacher just coming into the schoolroom, and we were one of the few schoolrooms that wasn't actually watching it live, and just white face and said, the Challenger went down, and no one could speak the rest of the day. It destroyed a lot of people's innocence, including mine. Something that I don't feel like I ever got back until we started seeing the photos from Mars in the mid-'90s.
Sure.
That reinvigorated. So if you notice, a lot of these films that were trying to be Spielberg and stuff, they would venture in explicitly into the stars, and then after '86, you really saw that peter out a lot because the wounds were just too damn fresh. But you know what? It's a sign that it continues to resurface, even though tragically we've had also other space disasters since then. Of course, now NASA's just in trouble because it's got idiots in charge of its budget and everything. But you can. It says these are films that says it's not foolish to look into the stars. It's not foolish to think that just picked on in school, or you're stuck in a trailer park, or you don't know how to talk to the people you're interested in, or you don't know where you're going in life. You can do amazing things, and these films really put that home towards a lot of younger people, which is what they were aimed at back in the day. And I think that that's why the films of this period were so important, is because they represented a time when you could dream big, and we didn't have that innocence shattered yet.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out, because I remember that when it blew up, we all thought it was kind of a joke. We're like, yeah, right, because there had been so many great launches with the shuttle it was considered safe. So I think that's what helped influence these movies was at that time space travel was safe with the shuttle. And so you could dream, and it wasn't scary anymore to think of that. I mean, we're not talking about the 50s where we had where the spaceship went up the highest anyone ever had, and he came back with a bacteria and turned into a mutant.
Yeah.
You didn't have those type of films so much as you had people going into space in a positive manner. You wanted to go into space, and then that happened, and yeah, you're right. The films did change.
It
wasn't
absolutely
just
changed the entire culture. It changed everything. It changed it changed our souls in a way.
Well, it was also, look at the 80s. And the 80s, despite the fact that, some people, look back and say, Reagan was the worst person to ever live. If you look at national pride, I mean, the 80s, that is...
We had a lot, yeah.
You don't get higher as far as national pride goes than the 1980s.
Oh yeah.
And when it was, to use a phrase I hate, winning.
Yeah.
The U.S. was winning.
Yeah.
We were the fact is that in those days, anyone who was our enemy was scared shitless of us.
Yeah.
And anyone who was our ally respected us, and everyone who lived here was like, I got no job, but hell yeah, America, and the shuttle going down was that first slap of the fuck. It's not a perfect world.
Yeah. Yeah, you did have that kind of reality check with it up until then. Yeah, there was a lot. Patriotism was huge back then, in the 80s especially. I mean, then you got movies like Red Dawn, which is a complete fantasy film.
Complete fantasy, and yet whenever I'm watching it, I buy it. And then of course I want to slap myself. And then of course I want to slap the shit out of myself afterwards. So, like, this is the dumbest fucking movie ever, but I still if a movie can convince you of something, it can do it really well.
Yeah. So
it depends on how well it sells it.
So I hope this had our listeners got them interested in these films. If you haven't seen them before, they are available on various sources out there, either video on demand, Netflix, rental. So I hope you all check them out. Make sure you check out the forum now we have on Special Mark Productions. We have a forum for a thread there for the spoiler room. Please leave your comments, suggestions, what you thought of episodes. Love to hear your thoughts on it. Let's go real quick now down the road, folks. Brad, go ahead first. Your stuff, sir.
GalacticNetcasts.com. We talk about science, entertainment. We've got a couple of different shows, The Alien Invasion and Sci-Fi Geeks Club, where we actually interview people that are in the know in this world of sci-fi. GalacticNetcasts.com.
Awesome. Dawn?
Oh, hi.
Hello.
I'm in the audience.
Hello. In the audience, yes, a great movie blog as well. And Glenn, go ahead.
You can find me, best way is to follow me on Twitter, at Naked Hobo. You can find me on YouTube, Naked Hobo Productions, as well as on Facebook, Naked Hobo Productions, and check out my reviews on the B-Movie Bunker.
Awesome. And Paul?
ForsakenFilmReviews.wordpress.com. You can watch me eat milk duds.
Scott?
And you can find me on Movieocrity.com. That's MOVIOCRITY.com. It's where you'll see me post episodes of my web series. I post a lot of reviews. I just started up a series that with a companion series to be done by Jesse Hoheisel, where I'm looking at all the movies from 35 years ago on the corresponding weekend that they're happening. It's called Glory of the 80s. I'm doing that. And you can find all sorts of stuff like that at Movieocrity.com.
Awesome. And you can find links to these fine folks and my stuff as well on my YouTube channel on We Live Film, and our podcasts of previous episodes, not only on SpecialMarkProductions.com. We've got everything there. It's said including the forum. And if I didn't mention it before, we had the privilege, the honor, I had to talk to Catherine Mary Stewart, once again, Maggie from Last Starfighter. That's its own episode. Please check that out. Give some love to that episode. It was great. She was just a great person to interview. It was a fun time. I got to check mark something off my bucket list because I got to finally meet Catherine Mary Stewart, who is just, Last Starfighter is my all-time favorite movie like that, and to meet her and get to talk to her about the film and just her career in general was a blast. So please check that episode out. Make sure you check out all these other people's fine material, and if you're curious, my stuff as well. We appreciate you listening to us talk about these 3 films, and as always in the spoiler room, remember, the conversation is fresh, but the films are definitely spoiled.